Hello, this is Itojun Hagino from IAB, and this talk is about the IAB posting to nano mailing list on last October, titled IAB Concerns Against Permanent Deployment of Edge-Based Filtering. And after the posting, I got lots of questions, like, for instance, why IAB has a say to operator committee, or why this is an IAB concern. So I would like to clarify those questions. So basically, the October email was triggered by the Cisco vulnerability found in June-July timeframe, which was basically if some specially crafted packet reaches Cisco router, the Cisco router's interface will go shut down. So that was the vulnerability, and many of the ISP responded to the vulnerability by filtering based on protocol number at the eBGP routers. And because of that, PIM and mobile IPv4 and the other protocols does not go through that eBGP routers. And as a short-term workaround, while you upgrading Cisco routers, it is okay. However, IAB heard that the multiple ISPs plan to leave the filtering configuration forever. So that is the main concern for the IAB. So let me give you some example. So here's three ISPs, A, B, and C, and they all have vulnerable Cisco routers. And A and B upgraded Cisco routers, which is good, and the C that didn't upgrade the Cisco router, and installed the filter at the eBGP router. By the way, the line in the middle is the Internet Exchange. First bad thing about the filtering at the eBGP router and the not upgrading Cisco router is that the attackers could be your customers. So filter at the eBGP router is useless. Could be useless. And this is not really an IAB concern, but of course this should be operator's concern. The next one is the really IAB concern. These filters prohibit some of the important protocols, such as mobile IPv4 and PIM in the case of June-July Cisco vulnerability. However, if it was TCP, it was really horrible. It will be really horrible situation. And the key architectural importance of internet is the extensibility. And for the internet to be successful, extensibility is everything. For example, scalability, extensibility in size is very important thing for the internet. For example, if new ISP comes up and the ISP start advertising routes, there is no need for other ISPs to reconfigure their routers. It is one of the good property of the scalability of the internet. And another important extensibility is protocol extensibility. And on the internet, it is easy to introduce new protocols, such as, for instance, HTTP, DCCP, or some random gaming protocols. And it is not necessary to upgrade routers to introduce new protocols. And this is very important for the successful internet to be successful. And the filters at the eBGP routers will damage this protocol extensibility. Think about the extreme example of pseudo-internet which passes TCP port 80 traffic only. And we cannot call it internet, and it will show you that the protocol extensibility is very important for the internet to be successful. So, and the last issue, sorry. So this was the really IAB concern. If there is another incident like this, like the June-July Cisco vulnerability occur, and there's more eBGP filtering installed, and it becomes permanent. Protocol extensibility of the internet will be damaged, and it will be really bad for the architecture of the internet. Lastly, usually customers are not notified of filters at the eBGP routers, and even if they are notified, customers do not have control over which eBGP router to use to reach certain destination. So customers have no idea why specific protocol cannot go through, for example, mobile IPv4. So customers are not notified. It is a problem. And by the way, it is okay to filter as a service to customer with customer's consent at the customer edge routers. At the customer edge routers, it is okay. And the IAB comment does not discuss this. And it is okay to filter under customer's consent. So IAB doesn't discuss that. So to summarize, so IAB noted that the multiple ISPs plan to leave the filtering configuration forever, and that is threat to the internet itself, to the extensibility of the internet itself. So if your ISP is still filtering these packets and the filtering packets at the eBGP routers, please upgrade the Cisco routers and please remove these eBGP filters at the eBGP routers. And if you have comments, please come to the microphone or maybe email to iab@ietf.org. Thank you.
So we have time to take questions. I'll start. I was just listening to your talk, and I was thinking about all the filtering, edge filtering that we have installed around the internet, especially for, you know, whatever's happening on port 145 or whatever. And it seems to be that the IAB is making a distinction between that kind of filtering, edge filtering, and eBGP filtering. And you did have a comment about some commercial issue that had to do with customer consent, but I don't think that's relevant here. So do you have any comments about that? Also breaks the extensibility of the internet protocol stack by not allowing, you know, some ports that are user-defined ports through. And that's pretty common, possibly more common than, you know, filtering for the PIN bug or whatever.
Yes, the port filtering could of course damage the extensibility of the internet, and also customers will be puzzled when they happen to pick certain port number, or when they are using FTP or something. So I think there's no big distinction between port filtering and protocol number filtering, I think. But in this certain case, we heard that a lot of ISPs are installing filters at the eBGP routers, and they will stay forever. We heard, so we made some statement.
Let me see if I can make the distinction. Is it because they're eBGP filters as opposed to filters usually on customer links, or I'm not really sure why? For example, why would let me see if I can ask it a different way. Why would the IAB have an opinion on this and not on what's going on edge filtering, in edge filtering?
You mean customized filtering?
Yeah.
For the customized filtering, normally customers are asking ISPs to filter, usually, or maybe.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, it goes both ways. Yes. So also the IAB is concerned more about backbone, more about the protocol extensibility in the backbone than the edge, I guess.
Yes. Barry Green, Francisco. There's no distinction whether you put the filter on your customer edge or your peer edge. and you're using the eBGP routers and confusing the issue by saying on the parent edge, if I block IP mobility to mitigate a certain incident on my customer edge, you lose the service. Just do it between autonomous systems. And you got to remember, autonomous systems have the autonomy to take care of their selves and their customers. So the IAB going through and saying that autonomous systems, you shouldn't do this to protect yourself or your customers. I mean, this is kind of the reality with the way attacks are. And you take that down, you know, you look at most enterprises, what's recommended for them to take care of their systems is they're going through and block too. Oh, this mic isn't.
Thank you.
So when you look at enterprise systems, right, they block these ports. So these services are broke anyways for going out within a ubiquitous internet that has no filter and no barriers. So what I'm getting is the IAB saying, look, this sort of filtering is blocking the end-to-end free open internet model. But autonomous systems always had the power to control what goes from point A to point B.
Correct. If some certain enterprise, like for instance, company A would like to filter the mobile IPv4, that's their choice. And the
Company A is Sprint. Company A is a backbone. What's the difference between Fidelity as a bank, Cisco as a vendor who has a network, and a backbone provider?
I think there is a there's a distinction between the leaf side, like enterprise, and the backbone provider like Sprint, I guess.
But see, you're making a distinction where you put it. See, the service breaks when there's a security incident, and it's any security incident. We're getting many of these security incidents out there, and people are dropping in filters to protect themselves and protect their customers, to make sure their businesses keep on working.
Yes, but my point is, so as a short-term workaround, it's okay to filter. However, do not leave those filters in forever.
But
that's my point.
But as we're seeing from security statistics, a lot of these problems never go away.
For instance,
Blaster, Slammer, a lot of these things never go away.
Yeah.
Once you know of a particular exploit, they never go away. Then you look at customer patch rates. You know, you have customers who never patch their systems because they don't know about it.
Yeah.
So there's an industry-wide problem. I think IAB is specifically going through and say like, oh my goodness, mobility broke and it's all because of a vulnerability. So we recommend this. I don't think IAB is actually looking at it from the big picture of the whole entire context. They're looking at it from a very narrow context and say, oh, you broke my protocol. You know, and that's not the IAB's job, to be looking at something that's such a narrow focus.
I'd say it's exactly the opposite. The IAB is taking the wide view. They want the internet to continue to work the way it used to work and not have it be slowly destroyed by filters that pop up everywhere that nobody can control.
But then the IAB should be going through and saying, here's the inherent reasons why, and this is what we should be doing. The filters are a consequence of some other issue. They're a consequence of some other issue out there.
That's right. That's right. They are a consequence of primarily of Microsoft software and its incredibly poor security record. It doesn't show any signs of getting better anytime soon. But it's not so much a question of where the filters are placed, but who controls them. Okay, that's the crucial issue. Does the end user control the filter, or does the ISP control the filter? The ISP is supposed to be there to provide a service to the end user. By putting in a filter that I did not ask for, they're not doing what I want them to do, what I'm paying them to do. If I want to protect my own machines with a filter, that's my choice. That's not something the ISP can ram down my throat.
But that's a business decision between you and your service provider.
So if you're upset, I'm the one paying my ISP, I ought to be able to have some say over this. Instead, the ISPs are saying you play by our rules, you pay us, or you know.
Or you move to somebody else. That's business. That's life as a business, right? But autonomous systems have autonomy to control and protect.
You realize what's going to happen as a result of this. Okay, you think you can simply do this and get away with it. What will happen is that everybody's going to start putting up encrypted filters, encrypted tunnels, to get around this. And pretty soon, there'll come another worm which will hit some encrypted tunnels, and you won't have any control over it. Okay, and all because you said, well, we're just going to filter and we don't care what the customers think. The customers, in fact, have the upper hand here in being able to build encrypted tunnels, and then everybody will be very unhappy.
Yeah, there's lots of unintended consequences that can happen from it. And there's, in the security community, we look at all these very wild unintended consequences that can happen.
So the point is, think about what the IAB is saying. They have a point to what they're saying.
I guess I have two comments. One is to your statement about it being clear who is a backbone provider and who isn't.
Can you identify yourself?
I'm Eric Gothier. I work for Boston University. We have 30, 40,000 systems on our network. We've got private peering. We've got transit peering. We've got BGP peers down to customers who buy ISP type access to us. So it's not really clear to us, are we a backbone? Are we a small ISP? Are we an enterprise? So I think that you're making a very clear distinction about what you're talking about in terms of, well, this only applies to certain people. But in a practical standpoint, it's not really clear who it is that you're talking about, because for us, am I a tier 1 because I have X number of customers? Am I a tier 2? Am I an enterprise? I think the second point that I'd like to make is that although I agree with the statements about the extensibility and the end-to-end principle, and I'll sit in my boss's office and the CIO's office and the president of the university's office and talk about these things. But then they turn around and say to me, well, we have two options. We can follow this sort of philosophical path and leave no filters in place and watch the network melt down. We can spend a lot of money to prevent that network from melting down and leave these filters out. Or we can take a zero-cost solution and just filter out a particular port. And I haven't found a good argument to my bosses where I can justify not putting those filters in from an economic standpoint. Do you have any words of advice for what I can say to make the argument?
So you're asking for.
You're telling us that we should follow a certain practice.
Yeah.
And yet, when I stand in the offices of my boss and my CIO, and I say, well, we have to follow this guideline and not put filters in, and they say, why? And I say, well, sort of philosophically, the internet should scale better were we not to do this. And he said, well, how much is it going to cost us not to put these filters in? Well, we'd have to buy a bunch more gear. We have to improve our network capacity. We have to hire a bunch of security people. And he says, well, what's the cost of putting these filters in besides ruining this philosophical concept? And my answer is, well, about 10 minutes worth of work. Well, what I'm looking for is, what is the argument that I can use?
I just gave you one. The argument is that eventually, if you tick off your customers enough, they will start building a patchwork of encrypted tunnels that you will no longer be able to filter when the time comes. I spoke on exactly this point yesterday. I said that if you tick off your users by blocking end-to-end model, they will work around you by setting up encrypted tunnels. Okay, and when you do that, you no longer have any control at all. It becomes completely opaque to you. And when the next blaster worm hits, you will be defenseless. That is the cost. I may not hit you now, but it'll hit you in the future.
Sorry, my name is Chris. I work for a reasonably sized network. And we internally...
Pardon me, could you state your name and talk into the mic so folks can hear?
My name is Chris, and I work for a reasonably sized network. So I'm not really going to say my company's perspective on the problem, but my personal and the operators who run the network that I work on's perspective. There's two pieces, and to some extent, you're right. I didn't catch your name.
I'm sorry, Phil Karn. I work for
Phil.
I
Okay.
spoke yesterday in New England.
Sorry, I have a really bad memory for names. So, Phil, to some extent, you're right. If at an ISP level you do this filtering, which is the IAB's concern, then your customers will A, be ticked off, B, find some way around it, and C, won't ever fix their problem, right? So if you look at problems specifically like virus-related problems, not the Cisco problems, we'll deal with that one in a second, but virus-related problems from an ISP perspective, I can block TCP port 80 and solve Code Red's problem on my network, right? Of course, I'll have a lot of other problems then. So from an ISP perspective, there's a lot of judicious decision. Do you want to filter this? and be the firewall for your network, or you just want to kind of let it run rampant and say, you guys really have to clean up?
It's not an either-or thing. I mean, I think we're all in agreement that filters within the core have a role when there's an emergency going on. When Blaster is just hit, there's no. I don't think anybody disagrees.
Yeah,
with that.
not Blaster per se, but use the Cisco example.
Something like it.
So the decision comes down for us, or for, again, not MCI, but for the people that run a large network. You need to save your network first and let everything else go. So if for the Cisco example, I need to filter the 4 protocols, PIM, IP mobility, and two other protocols, right? I need to filter those to save my Cisco devices until I upgrade them. As soon as I'm done with my upgrade path, off come the filters. And believe me, we got a lot of flack for doing that. But
wait, you say you want to protect your own Cisco routers? Well, those are your hosts. You're free to filter those any way you want.
Exactly.
You don't block what the customers are sending to each other. There's a big difference there.
Right. That's true. But there is a limit to what filtering I can do around my network. I have to make a decision. Can I put a 1,000-line access list or a 4-line access list? So I can't support a 1,000-line access list everywhere, so I have to, make some business decision that says, well, I'm going to filter this for as short as possible, rush my upgrades, get everything done as quickly as we can, remove all the filters and let everything go, and provide exception case if required. So from an ISP perspective, you're right. You can't filter this. You can't be the Internet's firewall. It's a losing battle, and everyone here, including IAB, agrees. I think the question from the Boston University guy who just ran away, there he is how do you make your decision? You have to decide whether parts of your network are going to melt down if you don't do this, or they're not. And you're an educational place, so you really can't even filter anybody anyway, right? So
point of order, guys.
You have to provide open communication. You have to provide them.
Okay. Point of order here. We're running out of time for this section, and I want to give Bill a chance. So let's have Bill, and then if we have any time left over, we'll go back. Okay? Is that fair?
Thank you.
1 second.
Okay.
Bill have a chance.
Just kind of an interesting. Steve Belvin was unable to persuade me to sit down. Historically, we have discovered, or at least some of us are aware of the fact that filtering in the core has a performance impact. Mm-hmm. And so pushing filters closer to the edge tends to increase our performance and the amount of packets we can move, hence the amount of money you can make. Mm-hmm. So filtering in the core is often, or historically has been considered a bad idea and something that you only do as a last resort. From Phil, I will argue with you from empirical evidence that opaque data, i.e. an IPsec encrypted tunnel, is recognizable by certain ISPs, and they will filter opaque data. If they can't recognize it, they'll block it. And that's a known technique that some people use. So your argument about being able to do IPsec encrypted end-to-end tunnels to bypass things it sounds a little hollow to me. I'm sorry?
Port 445 HTTP over SSL. You block that one too? You're going to have Amazon.com and other retailers very unhappy at you if you start blocking.
For my particular network, there are 2 protocols that get through, and only 2. Port 22 and port 53. There's no port 80, there's no 25, nothing.
Is an interesting choice.
I understand.
Okay,
we can talk about that later, but the filtering, the idea that filtering, as Chris pointed out, where you have filtering that protects your assets, your resources, whatever they may be, whether it's the Cisco routers, whether it's the bandwidth that I have purchased. My customers, in fact, are somewhat lower on the scale than protecting the infrastructure. There is, in fact, a hit list that says, if I'm an academic institution, the student dorms go first, right? So there's this list that says that I degrade my network in this fashion, and to whatever benefit, and everybody has to make those sets of choices on their own. What's difficult, and where I sort of disagree with the IAB position, is the significant problem that occurs in the edge, near the edge, the customer prem gear, the firewalls, the Linksys gear, where the customer doesn't have a choice. People have hard-coded into silicon specific choices about what is and is not allowed, and that I would be more concerned about.
Well, now that we've cleared this all up for the IAB, we kind of have to move on and give Ray a chance. But good discussion, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.